is now my honor to introduce our esteemed guest for the evening, Elliot R. Wolfson, a fellow of the American Academy of Jewish Research and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, is the Marsha and J. Glazer Endowed Chair in Jewish Studies and Distinguished Professor of Religion Emeritus at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He is the author of many publications, including most recently, The Duplicity of Philosophy's Shadow, Heidegger, Nazism, and the Jewish Other, Heidegger and Kabbalah, Hidden Gnosis, and the Path of Poesis. Hope I pronounced that right. Suffering Time, Philosophical, Kabbalistic, and Hasidic Reflections on Temporality, The Philosophical Pathos of Susan Tobes, Between Nihilism and Hope, and Nocturnal Seeing, Hopelessness of Hope, and Philosophical Gnosis in Susan Tobes, Gillian Rose, and Edith Weishogrod. He's also currently doing a fellowship at the Harvard Divinity School. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Elliot Wolfson.
I will try to project. Well, first, before I give my thanks and then start, hearing how few people knew Isaiah Berlin gives one pause about one's accomplishments, because the shelf life of a scholar and academic is not so great. But nevertheless, we never know what the future will hold. So first, I want to thank Shmuley and whoever else was instrumental in bringing me down. It's a pleasure to be here. Although I must admit, usually when I give an academic presentation, it's not in this kind of setting, and people will have to excuse me because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make eye contact with everybody in this kind of setting. But that's only because of the awkwardness of the situation. So we're going to talk about not the book Open Secret, which came out, I think it was I even forget, maybe 2009. But we will talk about Messianism and Chabad. But before we do so, I wanted to give some introductory remarks, and then hopefully we'll be able to look at some of these texts together. So I will be mostly focused on the Messianism promulgated by Menachem Mendel Schneerson, whose dates were 1902 to 1994, and he was the seventh Rebbe of the Chabad-Lubavitch dynasty, and you've already heard it was initiated by Shneer Zalman of Liadi, 1745 to 1812, also known as the Alter Rebbe. So before we get into the substance, I want to say something about Chabad and the beginnings of Hasidism, and then something about the Messianic ideal in Judaism, and then about Messianism in the first decades of Hasidism, and then that will prepare the ground to discuss Chabad Messianism, okay? So now Hasidism, the word Hasid means a pious individual. Hasidism means piety, or it's a term that was used already. I mean, it's a biblical in origin, but it was already used in the Talmudic period to refer to individuals who took upon themselves a kind of extra legal sense of piety. In other words, they express their piety or devotion to God by going even beyond the law, not against the law, but going beyond the law. But we're using the term Hasidism here to refer to the movement that began in the 18th century and traced to Israel ben Eliezer, whose dates were 1698 to 1760. He's known as the Besht, which is an acronym for Baal Shem Tov, the master of a good name. And there were many people who were known as Baalei Shem, masters of the name, and this usually referred to people who were adept in magic or exorcism or maybe even shamanism, one might say, a Jewish form of shamanism. But of course, he was called Baal Shem Tov, the master of a good name, because he sort of stood out and was outstanding at his trade, at his vocation. But more importantly, he is the founder of this pietistic movement, which put an emphasis on the celebration of life rather than an ascetic withdrawal from the material world. The mandate was to sanctify the material world, to find the holy in all things. So the Beshta, the Baal Shem Tov, was the fountainhead of this movement. He had several students. His major student, who really was responsible for giving sociological shape and creating a movement, was somebody by the name of Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mezrich. His dates are 1704 to 1772. And he had many students, and one of his students was Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Right? And again, the Maggid of Mezrich was the one who put into place the structure that eventually led to the creation of different Hasidic circles and dynasties. And this transformed the landscape of Judaism in the 18th and 19th centuries, continuing until the present. Now, the second introductory topic is the Messianic ideal in Judaism, and obviously I'm going to be very brief here and woefully inadequate, but we have to get on to our major focus. Now, as you probably know, Messianism is an ancient belief. It's traced to certain verses in the Bible, but to be candid, within the scriptural landscape, it's very unclear what the contours of this phenomenon are. And it was up to the rabbis to kind of figure this out. And they did, but even within rabbinic literature, there are many, many different opinions, and it's not entirely clear if there is a precise doctrine or dogma. The belief in the Messiah is very multifaceted. It even led to a distinction in rabbinic literature, which has its roots in some pre-rabbinic literature, but becomes sharpened at the hands of the rabbis, of two messiahs. One messiah from the house of Joseph, the Mashiach ben Yosef, and the other from the house of David, Mashiach ben David. And it was thought that the Messiah from the house of Joseph would come before the Messiah from the house of David, and he would suffer death. So the verses in Isaiah, which refer to the suffering of the Messiah, which were famously taken in Christianity and applied to Jesus, are applied by the rabbis and throughout the generations to the Mashiach ben Yosef. But it's the Mashiach ben David, the Messiah from the house of David, that is ultimately the one who will come, bring peace to the world, transform the world, restore Jewish people to the land of Israel, and herald the rebuilding of the temple, and so on. Now, I can't get into the details and the intricacies of this belief, but I will say this. In the annals of Jewish history, every figure who has proclaimed himself, or for whom it has been proclaimed that he is the Messiah, was eventually rejected and deemed to be a false Messiah. I mean, we have to be honest. If we look at the course of Jewish history, that has been the situation. Franz Rosenzweig, a German Jewish philosopher of the 20th century, the early 20th century, famously said, and I quote, "The false Messiah is as old as the hope of the genuine one. He is the changing form of the enduring hope." So what Rosenzweig was saying is that a generation that loses its ability to believe in a false Messiah has no capability of believing in the true Messiah, right? And in fact, as I said, Jewish history has shown this to be a profound aspect of Messianism, to the point that some people have articulated the idea that the Jewish belief is in a Messiah who is coming, and not a Messiah who has come. And then there's also I'm just reminded here of the famous aphorism of Franz Kafka: the Messiah will come on the day after he has arrived. Not on the last day, but the very last day. All right, now we go to Messianism in the first decades of Hasidism. So you have to transport your minds and hearts to Eastern Europe in the 18th and early part of the 19th century. And we're going to introduce this very briefly by sharing with you the thesis of Gershom Scholem, one of the greatest scholars of Jewish mysticism in the 20th century. And he famously argued in an essay on the Messianic idea in Judaism that we need to distinguish the Messianism in Judaism and that of Christianity. Insofar as the former, that is Messianism in Judaism, always demands an external representation in history, a redemption of an unredeemed world. So it's always a kind of geopolitical phenomenon. Whereas Christianity, in Scholem's view, was content to emphasize the internal dimension of salvation or redemption, without necessarily correlating it with changes in the political and historical landscape. I don't know, in fact, I'll say stronger, I don't think Scholem's generalization is fair, but for the sake of argument, I'm setting things up by reporting what he has to say. Now, I will also, before turning to Scholem's view on Hasidism and somewhat challenging it, which will lead us to discuss Chabad, Scholem himself was not perfectly consistent. If you haven't read this essay, The Messianic Idea in Judaism, it is well worth reading. It's very poignant. It was written about a decade after the establishment of the modern state of Israel, and still obviously in the shadows of the cataclysm of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. And so there's a kind of poignancy that comes out in this essay, especially towards the end, where Scholem says the strength and the weakness of Jewish Messianism is that it is anti-existentialist. That's his exact language. And what does he mean by that? As he glosses it, it's a life always lived in deferment, such that every historical manifestation of Messianism has been unmasked as a pseudo-Messianism. That's Scholem's language. So he's not totally consistent. Most of the essay, he's trying to drive this sharp dichotomy between Judaism and Christianity, but when he gets to the end of the essay, he has to acknowledge that there is this dimension in Jewish Messianism, which is a life always lived in deferment. It just never comes, it's always coming. Or as Maurice Blanchot says, we're waiting to wait. Right? Well, be that as it may. Okay, so Scholem schematized the history of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, beginning in the 16th century with Lurianic Kabbalah, followed by the Messianic movement of the 17th century, Sabbatianism, and its echo in the 18th century in Frankism, and that followed by Hasidism. And he saw this in terms of a messianic structure. It's very Hegelian in nature, right? Because you have kind of the Sabbatian and Frankist movements are kind of antithesis to the Lurianic, I'm not going to get into all the details. We can discuss it if you like. And then Hasidism is a kind of synthesis, or Aufheben in German, of the thesis and the antithesis of Lurianic Kabbalah and Sabbatianism. So when it comes to Hasidism, according to Sholem, and I'm quoting him again, Hasidism, the 18th century Pietist movement, came and restored the balance by their emphatic and clear-cut differentiation. Individual redemption is to be strictly separated from the truly messianic redemption of all. So the way Sholem understood it is Hasidism is a neutralization of the messianic ideal, which put its emphasis on individual redemption and wasn't so much concerned with the redemption of the world. Now, I don't think this is sustainable, actually. And my own study of Hasidic texts, and some of them that purport to preserve the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, show that the early masters of Hasidism espoused a model of redemption that in fact avoids this dichotomy imposed by Sholem. Now, to be sure, you find in this literature a distinction between the individual redemption, in Hebrew, Gula Pratit, in the present, and a more general redemption, Gula Klalit, which is in the future. But the lack of a historical outlet did not result in this rift, in this separating of the two. On the contrary, the mystical insight that emerges from this teaching, this literature, is such that the consciousness of the oneness of all being, right, which goes beyond strictly monotheism, that it's not only that there's a belief in one God, but it's the sense that there is nothing that is real but the light of infinity, right? They quote the verse from Deuteronomy, Ein od milvado, which in its scriptural context, there's none but him, which in the scriptural context is an affirmation of monotheism, the belief in one God, but read through the Hasidic prism is saying it's more monistic, that there is no reality, there is no substance but the light of infinity. That's the pinnacle of the messianic insight, right? That's the messianic secret. And this translates both on the level of individual redemption and the general redemption. So there's nothing in my reading of these sources that would suggest a neutralization, right? It's not a neutralization of the messianic. It's a refocusing of the messianic. It's a mystical rendering of the messianic secret, which is to lead to this state of conjunction with the divine, which is predicated on the goal of bitul, the nullification of the self. Right? So the tenor and the character of the messianic, whether it's on the individual or on the general, has to be assessed or judged from that mystical vantage point. Okay? So this brings us to, actually, so I'm just reading the text on the train, and I jotted down this comment. This is very short, but it encapsulates what I've been sharing with you. This was written by not a Hasidic master, but by a Lithuanian Kabbalist from the school of the Vilna Gaon in the 19th century. And he says, I'll read it in Hebrew, then I'll translate it. V'chasher yushlam tikun hada'at legamre, az yavo Mashiach. When the rectification of consciousness or knowledge is complete or perfected entirely, then the Messiah will come. So that's exactly the point that is made by these early Hasidic masters as well. So there, once again, you see, with the gap in Jewish history between the opponents to Hasidism and the Hasidic masters, when it comes to something as important as this, there's actual more agreement than disagreement. All right, now we're, how are we doing on time?
We're good, we have all night.
Well, I don't know if everybody else agrees with you on that. Okay, so we're up to Chabad Messianism.
We're going to stay till Mashiach comes.
That's a long time. You have enough food?
Take it easy.
Yeah, it's a long time. Although
Time is
tomorrow is now, because now is tomorrow. All right. Now, I'm not going to talk about it, although I'm happy in the Q&A period if you want. The journalistic interest in this topic was, did the Rebbe think he was the Messiah? Did his followers think he was the Messiah? Right? There has been a lot of discussion about that. I'm not particularly interested in that question at the moment. I think it's more important to try to get under the guts, as it were, of the Messianic teaching. I think that's more instructive and more useful, both intellectually and spiritually, but I'm happy to discuss the other topic if you like. But one thing I think is indubitable, right? That is, from the very beginning of Menachem Mendel Schneerson's accepting the role of the seventh Rebbe of this movement, he understood the challenge and the mission in Messianic terms. And you see that in the discourse that Chabad Hasidim believe was his inaugural discourse as the Rebbe, as the seventh Rebbe. And that was given on January 18th, 1951, on the 10th of Shvat, and that was the first anniversary of the passing of the sixth Rebbe, who was his father-in-law, Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, or as he's also known, the Rayatz, the Rebbe Rayatz. So when you look at that discourse, which is known as the Basi Lagani discourse, I'm going to refer to Menachem Mendel Schneerson either as the seventh Rebbe or by the acronym Ramash, although that acronym was used before he became the Rebbe. Well, maybe I'll just refer to him as the Rebbe. It'll be easier. So you see that he discusses there the 7 generations. Right? And he refers to this being the 7th generation. And he saw himself as the 7th and the leader of this 7th generation, the Dor HaShvi'i, 7th generation. And he puts already in that first discourse great emphasis on the task of this generation to bring about the Messianic redemption. Right? And really till the end, till he couldn't speak anymore, he saw his role as completing the task and mission of his predecessor. He never referred to himself as the leader, as the Nasi in Hebrew. He always referred to his father-in-law, his predecessor, as the Nasi Hador, the leader of the generation. And he saw himself as completing that task, which was very much focused on bringing about the Messianic redemption. And he often would refer to the time period of the 7th generation as living in the Ikvata de Meshicha, the footsteps of the Messiah. Sometimes he was even more emphatic, and he spoke of the Ikvata de Meshicha, the footsteps of the Messiah. Or sometimes he would say, we are in the Siyuma de Ikvata, we are in the end of the footsteps. Now, what does it mean to be in the footsteps of the Messiah, or the end of the footsteps? How long is this period of time marked? Does it have an expiration date? Or is it interminable? Is it an end that is endless? Because it cannot end and still be the end. So I'm not going to revisit everything I wrote in Open Secret, but I want to focus on the conception of time that undergirds this messianic vision. Okay. But there's one other thing I want to say before we do that, and we're going to do that by looking at some passages together. There's a very, very complicated cosmology that was developed by the Chabad-Lubavitch masters, beginning with the Alter Rebbe Schneerson of Liadi. And it's sometimes in a simple way expressed by a wordplay between ha'olam, the world, and he'elem, concealment. So you will find these in this literature constantly saying that the world is the place of concealment. What is being concealed in the world? What is being concealed in our physical world, in all of its diversity and complexity, is the fact that the only thing that is real is what they call the atzmut, the essence. Right? This essence is in itself real unknowable, unspeakable. We really don't have any words for it, but we know everything that is a manifestation of that essence, of that atzmut. Or sometimes they will speak of it as the atzmut ein sof, the essence of infinity. And all that is real is a manifestation of that, but that's concealed in our world. The messianic insight, the messianic perfection of consciousness is to be able to see that even the physical world is in truth a disclosure of that essence, which is beyond physicality. So here, listen to what the Rebbe said on December 12th, 1954. He said, "The perfection of nature is such that it will be discerned openly that nature is divinity." In Hebrew, Hashlemut teva hi sheyed nikar begilui shehateva hu elohut. Right? Now, in fact, in the inaugural address that I mentioned before, he also addressed this question, and he said, this is in Yiddish, I'll translate, Elohus und Olam in dieselbe Sach, which means divinity and the world are one and the same thing. Now, it's incumbent upon us to try to understand, what does dieselbe Sach mean? What does he mean that divinity and the world are the same thing? Now, I would contend, we have here a scholar, Spinoza, it's different than Spinoza's Deus Sive Natura, right? In what sense? Because if I understand Spinoza correctly,
Pantheism?
yeah, and also for Chabad, we're talking about the divinization of nature rather than the materialization of God. But nevertheless, it's very important because this is what is the core of the Chabad Messianism, in my opinion, right? Not the journalistic interest if he thought he was the Messiah or not, but to bring people to this consciousness of being able to transform our thinking, our way of being in the world, to the point that we understand that divinity and world are one and the same thing, right? Now, he understands the difficulty of this. In fact, he refers to this on occasion as the impossible of impossibilities, right? How can the infinite light, how can the light of infinity, which is boundless, be contained in the world of space and time? But that's precisely the paradox that we must take hold of if we want to understand how it is that nature will be revealed openly to be divine. Okay, now the second point, and this really will bring us to our text.
Can you just distinguish between that and Spinoza, if you don't mind? Just maybe short.
Say this some more.
The distinction between those two things. Short elaboration.
Yeah, well, if I understand, you correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Smith. I mean, but
I'm not making correct any correction.
not yet.
I thought so.
Oh, well, no, well, I think when okay, you call it pantheism, I think? I mean, that's
Yeah,
how,
maybe, I'm just-
no, that's how it's usually labeled, like, but, I mean, he famously said God or nature, right? Because for Spinoza, that's the one substance, right? It has many modes, but the one substance we can call God or nature, but it seems that for Spinoza, this entailed a kind of materialization of God, of the divine. Whereas Chabad, it's a divinization of nature. That's what I think the Rebbe meant when he said that divinity and the world are one and the same thing. Right? I mean, again, the Yiddish is very clear. Elohus und Olam in dieselbe Sach. Right? They are the one and the same thing. But that results not in the materialization of divinity, but in the divinization of nature. And that is the concealment that is finally unconcealed with Messianic consciousness. So the ha'olam, the world, is no longer ha'olam. It's no longer the place of concealment, because you finally see that in fact what constitutes materiality is this light of infinity. That's the ultimate material reality. All right. Now, the other thing to bear in mind here is what is the operative conception of time here? Now, this gets tricky and difficult. As the years progressed and the Messianic fervor became more and more intense, and this is because of what the Rebbe was teaching, he seemed to really come to believe that in some sense we were already there. Sometimes he says, there's a famous image that his father-in-law used, all we have to do is polish the buttons. Remember that one? Or when we're ready, we just need to polish the buttons. Sometimes he says, all we have to do is knock on the door. So one of my essays on this, I conclude the end, even higher than that, we have to come to realize that there's no door that we have to knock upon. Right? But he didn't say that. He said all we have to do is to knock on the door. So in some sense, he already thought the future is present. But here's the twist. He thought the future is already present as the present that is always future. Right. And so this, I think, can be, if contrasted everybody knows what the parousia is in Christian faith, the second coming. So the belief in the second coming is the one who is to come has already come. Right? So there is this awaiting for the second coming. And that renders the future present by its having already been in the past. By contrast, the Chabad teaching, and I think one could extend this more generally to the Messianic hope in Judaism, is predicated on this waiting that renders the present future by anticipating a return to a past that is always in a state of what is to come. And so there's a verse that is quoted to express this idea. It's from Lamentations. It's made its way into the traditional Sabbath prayers. Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem, some Lamentations. Renew our days as of old. Now, what does that mean? Well, read Kabbalistically, it means the renewal of that which is ancient is a renewal of that which has never yet been. So, Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem. Right? Renew our days as of old, which means the renewal will be a kind of restoration, but it's a restoration of what has not yet been. All right? Again, how are we doing? Seriously, because keep going.
Talking about the infinity of time. You asked what time it is?
I know because I have compassion on the...
11 minutes Zeit. It's done.
Yeah. That's true. Actually, I think that is very...
You talk until the last person leaves.
All right, so let's look at
That's
some...
going to be me, so we're going to be...
Okay, so we're going to look at a few texts. I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but let's start with the first text. Everybody has, or you can share?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from... This is an articulation of the paradox that each moment of time is a replication of the same that is always different. Right? The same that is always different.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Can you explain that in layman's terms?
Speak up, please.
Can you explain that in layman's terms? Because I'm having trouble wrapping my head around
Everything I'm saying.
yeah.
That's good. Did you ever hear of Alfred North Whitehead?
Excuse me?
Did you ever hear of Alfred North Whitehead? He said in one of his books, seek simplicity and distrust it. What can I do? So what do you ask me?
Just to explain like in layman's terms, because you're saying like the...
Well, these are layman's terms.
You haven't seen him, but he's really... I told him to tone it down to...
I mean, you can't go over the whole thing, so I don't know how much.
Could you have a specific question?
Yeah, you say like in the future there's a return to past that's new, but in simpler form. Like what?
Well, I don't know how to say it more simple than that, but the idea is that the past is a kind of linear circularity here of time. The past, we think of the past as being something that is, the past, as if it's somehow closed. But in fact, in this conception of time, the past is as open as the future, right? So my way of thinking, which is heavily influenced by the Kabbalistic sources and really particularly by the Chabad sources, because I think they articulated in the profoundest philosophical sense, the past is constantly being reshaped, which is to say, therefore, that the past is precisely where we have never yet been. I don't know how else to say it. But that's... All right, come on, it takes time. You gotta be, patience is difficult for this generation. But there's a difference between information, knowledge, and wisdom. Wisdom requires patience. You don't get it through a Google search.
I was just wondering, so, okay, I think I kind of understand what you're saying, but I'm curious, how can we say that the past is as changeable as the future when, of course we have these memories and we can, and like this history that we can shape in an infinite number of ways. So I see it from that standpoint, but I feel like there's almost like another level of infinity that the future can have, because, what's happened in the past is, I feel like it is confined more so than what can happen in the future. Like there's so many things that we probably cannot even imagine.
No, I understand, and I think most of us do live our lives that way. So I understand. This is a different way of construing time, which requires, look, you could sit on it for a long time and then ultimately reject it. I'm okay with that. But in defense of what I'm trying to present here, yes, this is not the ordinary kind of conception of the way we think of the three temporal modes of past, present, and future.
I'm going to humbly translate Elliot into English. Only because I've actually read his book, and I have spent most of my life in these subjects, and I'll try to make it as simple as, and I'm a simple guy, so I'm going to just try to bring it down. Tshuva. Tshuva means to return or repent. So we live in a three-dimensional world. There's yesterday, there's today, and there's tomorrow. Elliot is trying to take us to a warped or transcendent space, a godly space, where today, yesterday, and tomorrow are one. And we're having a problem with that because we are limited temporally. We look at a clock, and we say what was, and what is, and what will be. And we can't unify them. The greatest physicists maybe can unify them because light emanating from a star 1,000 years ago is hitting us today. And in quantum physics, you can move into a warping of time-space. But practically speaking, in simple English, if I did something wrong yesterday to you, and today I feel bad about it, and tomorrow I want to be your friend, I can come to you and apologize and beg your forgiveness for what I did yesterday. And you can tell me I'm forgiven today, and tomorrow we will be friends. And what I have done is I have taken the events of yesterday with today and tomorrow, and I've rectified the past to the point where yesterday is different. Even though yesterday I actually did something wrong to you. By rectifying it today, in the hope of a better tomorrow, I have actually changed what happened yesterday. Not only to the point where you forgive me, but to the point where you can tell me it's as if it never happened. Forget about it. I have forgotten about it. You are forgiven. And in the depths of your soul, because of my request for you to forgive me, you really feel like I never did it. So in simple terms, I've unified time from yesterday, today, and tomorrow. You talk about this in the book. Tshuva is one notion of how you can enter a space if you live in that reality. In the reality of that what happened yesterday seems to have passed, but only to the extent that I can't recapture it today in the hope of a better tomorrow and make a better world. So the chassid, the mystic, Elliot, the people that we're talking about over here have moved their lives into a dimension where they have transcended time. They have transcended time. Move it to space. As Elliot will tell you, a Mensch ist, wo sein Kopf ist. A Mensch ist, a person is where his Ratzon is. A person is where his will is. You can be sitting in this room, and you're not here. In fact, some of you aren't even here. You're going to leave the room, and you wouldn't even know what happened here tonight. Because your mind is elsewhere. So now what you've done is, in the spatial dimension of the universe, you are in one place, your physical body is in one place, but you're not there. You're not present. You're not present. You are elsewhere. And then you can telepathically connect with someone or something or another place, physically being here and going somewhere else, and you ask, what does that mean? Bring it down to simple English. It means that you are now thinking about your mom, or you're thinking about your test, or you're thinking about your application or tomorrow's test, and that's really where you actually are. So these are simple things. What does it mean to be elsewhere? To be physically in one place and to be somewhere else? It means that you have transcended your body. And you're in a dimension where your mind is, where your Ratzon is, where your wish is, where your will is. And you can be living in yesterday because you've embraced a life that's anchored in something that's happened for thousands of years. And you could walk around the world where people are doing mundane, material, superficial things, and it doesn't speak to you. Because your brain and your mind and your heart and your soul and your consciousness exists in history. Or your mind exists in 100 years from now. Elon Musk. Just simple. You want it simple? I'll give it to you simple. He sees a world where the robots are running our lives. Just basic. Just what does that mean? It means that he looks around the world. He says, you want to short my stock. You want to do this. You want to do that. I'm 20 years ahead of you guys. And he really is 20 years ahead of us. And so either he's going to take it to the next level, right, or he's going to fail. But if you talk to the man, he is a man that lives in 2050. And go back in history and think about all the greats. They didn't live with us. They either lived in the past or they lived in the future. And they were able to unify those things. And they were able to actually exist like that. And we have all met people like that. Seldom, because most people come and go. And we're limited to the do's and don'ts of where we are. So that's simple English. I hope I have somewhat simplified deep in Hasidus.
You certainly simplified it. Don't worry about it. I'll just say this.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
I don't know people's names. Just one thing. This is a kind of messianic consciousness, which would mean a shift in a way of thinking about time. And just following what Shmuel just said, the compressence of past, present, and future is the way that these thinkers, and this goes back to the rabbis of late antiquity, understood the tetragrammaton. So, the most sacred of God's names is the four-letter name, the Yud-He Vav-He, which Jews do not pronounce. They pronounce it through its circumlocution or its epithet, but they don't pronounce it as it is written. But it's interpreted to be a compressence of the three temporal modes. Now, that's not an eternity in opposition to time, but it's the eternality of time or the temporalization of eternity. And that's the messianic consciousness. Right. Okay. I don't know. Yeah, do you want to ask me something?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess, does that mean to be messianic is to say that anybody who associates a person as Messiah to like one person who lived from this day to this day is wrong? Meaning like, I mean, I really hear what you're saying about how basically to pinpoint the Messiah as one person is a tale as old as time. And it sounds like it kind of transcends time. So all these people, like, I mean, Christians, for instance, like, to be messianic is to say that to say that Jesus lived like 2,000 years ago is wrong, because that's like one specific time frame, and the Messiah would transcend that. So, I mean, same with associating the Messiah with like a specific, rabbinical figure.
Well, it's interesting. Your question is interesting because I assume you haven't read Open Secret.
No, I'm sorry, and forgive me if it's explained in your book.
It's
I'm
fine.
just
No,
a layman,
No, you don't have to apologize. I ultimately wind my way to precisely that point. So I do say that I'm sure this is not going to sit well with everybody, and it's being recorded, so who knows, what's. But I already have written it that he is the Messiah only in the sense if he is the one who comes to emancipate us from the need to be emancipated, which goes along with what you're saying. Now, I don't have the time to get into this, but the question of Jesus is a very delicate one. Did you ever read the Gospel of Thomas?
Yeah, that's the apocryphal text, right?
Well, okay, apocryphal. I mean, what's inside, what's outside.
Yeah.
That's a matter of politicians making decisions.
Well, I guess I'm going from Catholic then, sorry.
But in the Gospel of Thomas, the view that is promulgated by Jesus in the name of Jesus there is not far from what I'm sharing here.
Sure.
It's not a matter of waiting for some future or for some being to come. It's a matter of a change of thinking about time.
It's more of a clarifying. Name? My name is Theo. Hello. This is more of a clarifying question, but is there any validity to the mortal conception of time, like in being split in past, present, and
Well,
future?
it's like this, quantum physics has fundamentally changed the way we live our world. But Newtonian physics is still valid. Every time you get on an airplane, you better hope Newtonian physics is still, right? So quantum physics, that's how I think of it. There are different levels, right? So yeah, the way we think about time, yes, we're all born at a point in time. We're all going to die at a point in time. And we live our lives in between. So sure, all of that is valid. But that doesn't mean there can't be a shift in thinking about time.
Yeah. Even with mortality, because the greats never really die. And what does that mean? It means that they really never die. Because 1,000 years after they left the physical world, we're still living with them. So it's a redefinition of what it means to be alive.
But that conception of past, present, and future is like it's a mortal conceptualization of something
Yeah, it's
that
what
they can't
Heidegger
understand.
called the vulgar conception of time.
Okay.
But the authentic conception of time for Heidegger wasn't so far from what we're discussing here. He also talked about a compressence of the three temporal modes such that we can anticipate the past and remember the future. I don't know if we should, maybe we shouldn't look at text. I don't know. I have a feeling,
More questions?
yeah, we'll just deal with questions.
Where's the other mic? Just
Maybe,
down there.
yeah, we'll do a few more questions.
Just hold the mic on this side of the table. We have one.
Thank you so much.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Victor Buffet. I'm a second-year law student here from Wilmington, North Carolina. To the idea on the conception of time and how maybe what we do today or tomorrow can, in effect, change what we did yesteryear, how does that change the more you get abstracted from the individual, interpersonal thing to a more maybe group v. group, country v. country, and like maybe in like a broader intellectual sense in terms of the agency that one has to do that? I mean that in the sense like, does it, our ability to change yesteryear, when you get more abstract, how does the pendulum shift from it being kind of agency driven to maybe more circumstantial?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't have an answer for that, but it's an excellent question, and it's a worthy question because But I think it's very difficult. I think the gap is too great. So from that, if I translate it back into this language, it means we're just going to have to live in an unredeemed world. And it may be possible for individuals to be awakened, to have some sense of enlightenment, but I don't know how to answer your question. I sort of, maybe when I was younger, I thought maybe it was possible. I don't think so.
Thank you.
Wait, go ahead. I don't know if
I'm Melanie. I didn't introduce myself before. I'm also at the School of Management. Thank you so much. I was wondering, like, I haven't read the book, unfortunately, so maybe you talk about it in there, but what are some of are there any, like, benefits or advantages that you find with this way of thinking that can, improve your life or your character or anything like that? The reason for it.
Again, you're kind of pulling me. I mean, use my example of quantum physics and Newtonian physics. I don't deny, right? But I mean, I don't even know where to be. I mean, you can't assess or judge this standpoint from the everyday standpoint, or what Heidegger called vulgar. We may not like the word vulgar, but really he didn't mean vulgar the way we use the term vulgar. Vulgus, he meant from the more common or everyday standpoint. This more enlightened way of thinking always has to be in dialogue or conversation with the more vulgar. But you can't ultimately judge its utility. You have to have a change of mindfulness or consciousness here. You have to start thinking about it differently. And that's not easy. But that's what this is all about. Look, there was a famous impromptu talk that the Seventh Rebbe gave a few years before he could no longer speak. You know, the famous one I'm talking about, where he basically said, I've done everything. Yeah. What was the date again? Right after Pesach.
No, last 2 hours was a can't not a
Yeah, it was right after Pesach, a couple of weeks after.
28th.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you guys heard.
Yeah, but you want to tell her what he's.
Yeah. So, I mean, he basically said, he's done everything he can. And now it's up to everyone else, right? But that was a remarkable kind of statement that he was making. But if I translate it back into your question, he basically was saying, I don't know how to answer. But he's not giving up. He's just saying, okay, now it's you. You have to come to the point of having a change of, I got to change my way of thinking, Dylan said in one of his albums.
Wait, Mitch, an intro.
Mitch, do you read
Mitch,
that?
an intro, please.
Mitch.
Yeah, for everybody else.
Mitchell, Dubin, Pittsburgh.
No, I don't talk to people from Pittsburgh.
Okay. Do you understand that that line that you just said, from his speech after Passover? Do you understand that as a acknowledgement of being a false Messiah?
No, because I don't have any. I mean, it's a complicated question if he thought of himself as the Messiah. I mean, there are certain allusions, maybe, but no, I don't think so. I think it's more. he's getting on in years, and he just felt like, he put all of his effort into it, and it still didn't happen.
It's still what?
It didn't happen, it's still...
So can you, just fundamentally, how can the movement go on thinking someone's a Messiah if they themselves say, I didn't finish I'm not the Messiah?
Well, the movement isn't only going on because of that belief. There are certainly Chabadniks who believe that, but that's not the sum total of the movement. Do you think that?
So I'm just asking, so it's fair to separate, I don't know, I'm asking, I don't know. It's fair to separate, yes or no, the idea that this man is the Messiah from the Chabad movement?
I'm saying, you asked, how could the movement go on? So I'm saying it would be incorrect to look at the Chabad movement and put all the eggs in that one basket.
Okay.
Right. Now, in his time, I don't know that there would have been a Lubavitcher who didn't think that he potentially could have been the Messiah. But since he's passing, there's a kind of schism here. I mean, not every Chabadnik thinks he was the Messiah, or that he will return to proclaim himself.
Well, I mean, it's obvious that he's not the Messiah, right? From what you just said.
That's beyond my pay grade. I don't make those decisions.
Well, if it's beyond your pay grade, then it's no one's pay grade. I mean,
all right.
You got to read your book.
Well, I have a question that might be related to this, which is, to what extent, in terms of the Messiah being someone that sort of transcends temporality in the way that we've been discussing, in what sense then is it incumbent on the people that believe in the Messiah to make the Messiah the Messiah? Because they're the ones that keep I was just thinking also about people, Shmuley saying the greats, or you putting Bob Marley and Bob Dylan, all the Bobs in the book, and how the way that artists continue to live on and have this some could argue in a way almost messianic messaging that lives on beyond their own lifetimes, but that in that way, because their work lives on, because perhaps in the past it was building upon things that came before, it collapses this temporality in a similar way. But that it's the people that keep listening to the music, the people that keep studying the Rebbe's speeches and texts, and I guess that's a lot of context to ask again the question of
what is the question?
Do the people make the Messiah? Like the people that follow the Messiah in keeping them alive in that temporality.
There's an old statement in Jewish sources, Ein melech below am. There's no king without a nation. Mm-hmm. So in some sense, I mean, as you did, I grew up in New York City, and there's a Messiah on every corner.
That's it.
It's true.
Certainly on every subway.
Yes.
But yeah, so you're right. From a sociological point of view, if there isn't a following, if there isn't a movement, there's nothing to the claim of being Messiah. And again, in terms of the annals of Jewish history, even when there have been movements, they've ultimately been deemed to be false or pseudo. That's the case.
But Mitchell, does that get almost like, not that I'm answering your question at all, but like the same idea of kind of the Chabad movement lives on and continues because people continue to believe in what had happened.
It's broader than that. No, but I was being a little bit playful with you. But I mean, the book, look, I knew the criticisms of this book before I saw any of them in print. But this book is an effort, to think the unthought in the Rebbe's teaching, and ultimately to redeem him from being subject to the claim of a false Messiah and leading a false messianism.
And actually, I would just add to your response, but only based on your book and the teachings of Hasidus and something you said before, that perhaps
other than the absolute false messiahs who converted to Islam, like Shabtai Tzvi, or or frankly, Jesus, from a Jewish perspective, was a false messiah. He didn't bring about anything close to what
but there's Bar Kochba, there are many.
But but not Bar Kochba. So
he was judged to be a false messiah. Too.
But I would distinguish between the false messiahs who from an evidence perspective, did not do the things that the Mashiach is supposed to do, which was very blatant and apparent to everyone, versus those great leaders of Jewish history who didn't bring about the ultimate Messianic era, but that doesn't make them a false Messiah. It means that like you say, in their time, and you say, let me explain. So let me answer. They didn't bring about the days of Mashiach. They didn't bring about the redemption of the world. They didn't bring about all the things that the Rambam talks about or any of the great scholars teach us are supposed to happen when Mashiach comes. But had Mashiach come in their generation, they would have been the Mashiach. So if Mashiach is something that is imminent, as you say, that it's something that has to be or is going to be, and it's something that we live with on a constant basis, every generation, every Jew has to believe in the coming of Mashiach, then there has to be somebody alive that should the Mashiach, should the redemption come about in that time, it's that person. And then the generation passes and you say it didn't happen. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't have been that person. And so he didn't finish the task of bringing about Mashiach. That doesn't make him false. It means that the time was not ripe for that person to emerge as the ultimate Mashiach. But if it would have been in that time, he would have been the Mashiach, as opposed to someone who deters or brings the people away from the ways of God. If you're doing everything Mashiach is supposed to come, and the redemption of humanity and civilization and the world doesn't finalize, that doesn't make you false.
I think that's what I meant before. But in his time, every Lubavitcher thought he could have been.
Not just Lubavitchers. I think a lot of people do.
Well, okay, but
anybody who believed the Mashiach, right?
But I think this is where it was a little different, because I think that the force of Jewish history is such that it has shown that the Messianic belief is in the coming of the Messiah, not in a Messiah who has come.
Okay, but do you want to talk about his Pashtus, the Mashal Chadar Vadar? His Pashtus?
Can I ask this?
Yeah, but we can legitimately have a different way of viewing this. I mean, that's fine. There's enough place at the table.
Just putting the things together, thinking about it, could it be that there was a Messiah, but the people, as you say, they're waiting for it, that maybe they didn't see or didn't want to believe in something that is going to come?
Well, that famous talk, what was it again? Chavchatz Nisan. That's essentially, I think, what he was basically saying. I've done everything. Exactly. It's really up to you now.
Yeah, like the acknowledgement of the people, like maybe the Messiah did come a few times.
You've got to change your way of thinking and your behavior based on that change of thinking.
And just going another step.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he was proclaiming himself to be the Messiah. But like I said before, from his very first address, assuming the leadership of the movement, he put the emphasis on the messianic mission of that generation of which he was the leader.
That means that he feels that he did everything as if he was, but the people didn't acknowledge him, or it wasn't the time. Just like,
well, I don't know about that.
It's complicated.
I think that's very complicated, and it's not crystal clear. But what is crystal clear is that his entire leadership from 51 to 94 was colored and framed by this ambition. All of it. That is, I think that's incontestable. And it's not like some people say, in the 1980s, as he was getting older, then his wife passed away, he sort of went off the rails. No. This is throughout.
Hi.
Wait,
So-
the mic.
I have one.
Yeah.
Is this thing on? No, I'm kidding. Jonathan from Miami. Quick
From
question.
Miami?
From Miami. You don't speak to people from Miami either? I don't.
That explains it.
Yeah, so in in the Bible, Samuel anointed King Saul and also King David.
Okay.
God anointed him, but through Samuel.
Yeah.
Shabtai Tzvi had like Nathan of Gaza, I believe, was
His
the
prophet.
one. Yeah, exactly. Was there any figure in Chabad or Lubavitch or Judaism that would have anointed him to give him, any sort of?
I think, no, I don't think so. I mean, when he finally agreed to become the leader of the movement, although, as I said before, he always referred to his predecessor, his father-in-law, as the leader. And he was just completing his task. I think that would be the equivalent, but I don't think there's anything else. There's nothing like, he didn't have any Nathan of Gaza, no.
Okay, so just like a follow-up, right? There's like a lot of biblical parallelism with Nathan of Gaza and Shabtai Tzvi, right? Being anointed by a great prophet. Do you think, that's a valid argument to use against, people that are, I have a lot of Chabad friends and I've asked them, directly, do you think that, Menachem Mendel Schneerson was the Messiah, and what a lot of people say is, I don't know, I can't say he's not, maybe he's in hiding. For me, it's what have you done for me lately? He's more important than, the forefathers. So how do you rectify that? Because, I've asked a lot of Chabad people, and it's kind of like a dance around the question, answer usually. I'm pretty traditional. I'm not an Orthodox Jew. I was raised in a traditional household. We keep Shabbat, kosher meat. We have different plates, but for us, it's so abstract because we weren't brought up in this community, and we're very close with the community. But it seems kind of like a hidden belief, almost kind of like the Donme in Turkey at this point.
No, did you say the Dhamme?
Yeah.
Well, no, that would be different because the Dhamme followed the conversion to Islam.
They converted to Islam, right? But they held this belief.
Well, but that's I know, but that's a huge difference. That's what Shmuley was saying before. I mean, that's a huge difference. And by the way, the Dhamme, for those who don't know, the Dhamme were the group of followers of Shabtai Tzvi who emulated his conversion to Islam. By the way, which is much more complicated than the way the story is told. Okay, because presumably he converted in September 1666. I have seen in texts in years following that where Shabtai Tzvi was involved in Jewish rituals at a Passover Seder, in the synagogue for Yom Kippur. So in other words, it wasn't a clean and absolute break with his Judaism. Okay. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a major feature of the movement. In fact, Nathan is one of the people who gave it theological justification. He gave it a Kabbalistic explanation. So I'm not denying that. But I'm saying it's more complicated. It's more complicated. He didn't, convert to Islam and throw away Judaism altogether. That's not the case. Now, the Donme were a group in Turkey that did emulate Shabtai Tzvi, but they were really the exception. Most of the people who accepted Shabtai Tzvi's claim to being the Messiah did not abandon their Judaism.
Thank you. I'm more interested in Messianism as a sociological phenomenon. Do you find that Messianism tends to become more important and widespread in after, in the Jewish case, pogroms or
Cataclysms of sorts.
or when there's when the economy is doing poorly or when the economy is doing well? You find that there's kind of trends with that.
It may be charted that way. I don't. I mean, all of this is in the shadow of the Holocaust, you know. So I think that is an important component of, well, the messianic intensity really picks up with the 6th and the 7th. But then a lot of it is being played out in the context of America, where things are different, right? And so they're not an imminent crisis. In fact, the crisis may be the lack of a crisis. And sometimes when you look at the Rebbe's teachings, that he's not so pleased with the way Jews are feeling comfortable in the American environment. Although he's grateful to the American environment, absolutely. In God we trust. He liked to talk about that. So it's a good question, and I think it probably has some, applicability and validity. But I would be cautious about making it too constricted. I think I think sometimes it breaks that mold.
Hi, I'm Elijah. Thanks so much.
Elijah, we were looking for Elijah.
Happens every year.
Elijah anoints the Mashiach.
Yeah.
What year are you?
Here, I'm a freshman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, aren't you supposed to transcend time?
Where are you from, Elijah?
Well, I'm from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
So,
oh,
sort of relates to
there the
what
whole
I asked.
time.
So I feel pretty familiar with the.
No, fine.
Well, not really, but somewhat at least a little bit familiar with the
Little louder,
Lubavitchers.
please.
I'm a little bit familiar with the Lubavitchers because they're all around in Brooklyn, and I'm wondering kind of to kind of expand on, or if you could expand a little bit on what you were saying before, and I'm curious if there's something about this iteration of Messianism that it seems to me that, I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious what you think about this. Like, if there's something about this iteration of Messianism that is particularly American, I guess, distinct
American?
from Eastern European, I guess.
Well, I would say the component of the Rebbe's teaching which is most reflective of the American context is the campaign for the 7 Noahide laws that he instigated. Now, this is, of course, not his, this is a much older idea in Jewish sources. Particularly important here would be the reflections of Maimonides, the 12th century Jewish sage, philosopher, and halachic authority. But the Rebbe took the ball and ran with it and thought it was extremely important for the Gentiles to be participatory in this Messianic campaign. So I think that is reflective. Now, there are many other facets of the Chabad movement as it evolved under his leadership that are reflective of the American environment, but as it relates to Messianism, I would put my finger on that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Harry Hatwell. I'm in the law school doing a master's from the UK originally. I'm just wondering, it relates slightly, what you said about the 1960s and 70s as being a big time for Messianism, whether there's, if you know about like the crossover there is between Chabad Messianism and like religious Zionist Messianism in Israel, the kind of Tzvi Yehuda Kook and that kind of movement, because it's the same language of footsteps of redemption, it's the same time period. Lots of it had an American following.
Yeah, that's another whole large question about the relationship to Zionism and Chabad. So famously, the 5th Rebbe, Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson, or the Rashab, was against Zionism. But that was early on, and way before the actual formation of the state. But I think for the 6th and certainly the 7th, there was a change, no doubt reflective of the trauma of the Holocaust. So now, as far as the Messianic language, yeah, I mean, we say in the prayers, the prayer for Israel, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu, it's the beginning of the flowering of or the blossoming of our redemption. I don't think the Rebbe would have been so happy with a kind of secular messianism. If you understand the modern state of Israel as heralding a kind of secular redemption, no, that would not be adequate. That would not be sufficient for him, right? But it's another very complicated question. Yeah.
We have time.
Just on a
Maybe we'll look at one text. But
getting
I'm
back
not
to
sure
simple
yet.
English here, and somebody who
Now we have time to look.
Yeah.
somebody who enjoyed your book, and maybe to answer some of
I
the
mean,
questions.
what language do you think I'm speaking?
No, you're speaking Elliot Wolfson, high English. So I'm just old English. Yeah. Now I'm going to just summarize. If I was writing a book review of your book, and to encapsulate everything you said tonight,
yeah,
and hearing the questions that are coming from the students. You know, there's a tension between Newtonian physics and quantum physics.
there can be.
Yeah.
But my point was, you can't do
One without the other.
You can't totally disregard it.
No.
We still live, parts of our world still need to be.
Speak up.
I said parts of our experience in the world still need to be controlled by the laws of Newtonian physics.
Right. So why isn't the summary of the open secret that the tension, the constant tension, is the messianic mind frame of mind?
Okay.
And so the struggle, and you ask, like, how can you live in a world that's atemporal or non-spatial? The answer is you can. The human being has the ability to transcend, to go to another place, and that's, I think, that's what I took from your book, and that's what as a chassid who's studied these texts my whole life, that's what the Rabbeim wanted from us. The Alter Rebbe wanted, from his little shtetl in Liazna or Liadi in the 18th century, he wanted us to liberate ourselves, going back to the beginning of your talk, to liberate the nation, to liberate the world, all the way to the 7 laws for the Noahide, which is the liberation of mankind, which is the liberation of the universe, by not escaping, but ascending from the restrictions of what we understand as our existence to a higher form of existence. And that's Mashiach. And that's Mashiach. And so it climaxes in the coming of a human being who's going to bring it all together with the building of the Beis HaMikdash, and we haven't witnessed that yet. But the answer is, this is the process. To want Mashiach, to daven for Mashiach, to pray for Mashiach, to live with Mashiach. They're not false messiahs. They were trying to liberate the world, and we're trying to liberate ourselves. I mean, we're taking pills, we're going to therapists, we're running, we're reading poetry, we're listening to music. What are we looking for? We're looking for self-liberation. I mean, that's what the world wants. Tomorrow night we have an event on LSD. Alternative realities. What is this all about? Mashiach, in your book, and so brilliantly, perhaps the best ever written summary of Chabad Hasidus through the 7 generations in English, for sure, from my perspective, and I think I've read all of them. This is the tension. And I think you struggle with it. I know I struggle with it. Because we do get up in the morning when we're hungry, we want to eat. Yeah. And we don't want to be ascetic monks. And so Chabad wants us to balance that, right? You get on the airplane, and your mind is in your destination. You're not on the plane.
Yeah.
You're not really on the plane, even when the plane has to function a certain way. So this is it. I mean, there's more questions than answers. But if you're not living with this aspiration, then you're living like an animal.
So I'm gonna close with reading the last text.
I'm closing, by the way.
And I'm choosing.
Yeah,
I'm choosing not a Chabad text in the spirit of ecumenism. Yeah. So this is the.
Wait, are we reading together?
Yeah.
Which page?
So is the second page, the last text.
Second page 5?
Yeah.
Page 2, 5.
This is from another Hasidic dynasty, from the Ger Hasidim, the Yehuda Aryeh Leib of Ger, his book Sfat Emet, and it's a reflection on the verse in Exodus, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of the month," right? So this is connected, if you know the scriptural context, this is connected with the Exodus from Egypt, the first Passover. So this is what he says. This matter is the redemption of Egypt. And obviously this will stand as a symbol for all forms of redemption. For in exile, this renewal, ha-hitchadshut, because remember the language of this month is ha-chodesh, that which is renewed. So he says, in exile, this sense of renewal is lacking. And in the time of the redemption, that is when it is clarified that everything is the vitality of God, blessed be He, which is another way of saying what I shared in terms of Chabad, that there is nothing but the vitality of God. There is nothing but the essence of infinity. And from this comes the renewal. From the vitality of the divine comes this sense of renewal. For there is constant renewal in the vitality of God. As it says, and this is from the prayer book, from the prayers, the daily prayers, Mechadesh b'chol yom tamid. It says about God, He who renews every day constantly. That is constantly every day. The one who forgets is in the midst of nature. As it is written in Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new under the sun. Somebody asked before about memory. So here's the opposite, right? The one who forgets this insight into the constant renewal of time is living only by the laws of nature, of which we would say there is nothing new. But with respect to the one, to the one who is conjoined to the interiority of the vitality of God, blessed be He, to the one who has this change of consciousness and is conjoined to the interiority of the life force of the divine, there is perpetual renewal. And this is what is written, this month shall mark for you. For everyone from Israel and the Jewish people can arouse this renewal by means of the faith by which he discerns in his heart that everything is from God, blessed be He. So then the question is, right, what you need to ponder and reflect upon is, what is the nature of renewal? What is being renewed? In my opinion, the Hasidic texts, and really the Kabbalistic texts more generally, yield that paradox that I said before. Every moment is the same because it is different. And different because it is the same. As Merleau-Ponty said about the moment, it's always new because it's always old. That's the paradox. That's the paradox about which the messianic wheel rotates. Ad kan.
Wait, do we have any questions?